AOC says so many people in this country hate women. Oh, geez. Even the guy at the party who pulls out a guitar is like, way to ruin the fun. Congressman Jamal Bowman says capitalism is slavery by another name. No, it's not. It's the thing that has given more people more prosperity and hope than any other system, flawed though it surely is.
Bill Maher is not stepping away from his criticism of AOC, and in fact he feels even more strongly about it, believing there is a real reason behind his concern. He thinks she could end up being positioned for leadership within the DNC, and he sees that possibility as a serious risk, warning that if it happens the entire party could fall into chaos and lose its direction completely.
Something like the free market is kind of synonymous with America, and if you don't like it, I don't know how you can say you love this country. You know who loves this country? You know who's not constantly complaining about what happened 200 years ago and who's not obsessed with seeing America through colored glasses and shaking off the stench of what irredeemable privileged assholes we are? Immigrants.
Years ago, Bill Maher was already sounding loud warning bells about Kamala Harris, but Democrats ignored every signal, pushed ahead anyway, and ultimately drove the party straight into a political disaster in the 2024 election. Now he's back again sounding the alarm, this time going after AOC and what he calls a progressive fantasy version of America that he thinks is completely disconnected from reality. And he's not holding anything back this time. Maher isn't being subtle or careful. He's coming in hard with full-force criticism and making it clear he sees real danger ahead if this direction continues.
Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want.
If you have been paying attention to AOC lately, she has been closely aligned with New York mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, and the messaging around their movement is becoming more aggressive. They recently shared a video encouraging every New York parent, regardless of legal status, to enroll their children in free pre-K and childcare programs in the city. The bigger picture, according to critics, is where this is heading. Mamdani campaign is built around expanding government-funded childcare, and he is now working alongside Governor Hochul to scale those programs, even further add his support for abolishing ICE and strong sanctuary city policies, and a pattern starts to emerge. This is exactly what Bill Maher keeps pointing out. He is not arguing against helping families or children, but he says the U.S. already runs social safety nets that support people without turning the entire system into a government-controlled model. He warns that pushing too far into full-scale socialist-style policies could leave cities like New York feeling over-bureaucratic and overwhelmed, like a permanent waiting room of government control.
DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act normal?
If you thought Biden was controversial, Bill Maher argues AOC operates on an entirely different level. Put them side by side and the contrast becomes obvious. Biden, for all his criticism, generally stays within a moderate framework. He has supported more flexible border approaches at times, but there are still rules, guardrails, and an effort to maintain control. It may be imperfect, but it isn't designed to be chaotic. AOC, on the other hand, represents a very different mindset. Along with her DSA-aligned allies, she is far more open to aggressive immigration reform rhetoric with fewer restrictions and less emphasis on limits. Where Biden tends to slow things down when tensions rise, she is more willing to push forward without that hesitation. And this is exactly the divide Maher keeps highlighting, not just disagreement over policy, but fundamentally different visions of what the country should be.
Okay, I say the next time we have debates, the moderator needs to frame that question a little differently, as say something about America that you like, because honestly, I don't know. why the people who are fighting for this country so hard even want it anymore.
And this is where Bill Maher says things start to feel strange. Why fight so hard to lead a country you constantly sound angry at? If someone truly loves something, they do not spend every week tearing it down with criticism that never seems to stop. With AOC, the pushback feels constant and automatic, like it never switches off. No matter what happens, whether it is economic gains, stronger jobs, or improving paychecks, there is always another wave of outrage ready to go without pause or acknowledgement that something might be working, and that is the difference. He keeps pointing out calling out problems is normal in politics, but there is a line between trying to fix a system you believe in and treating the entire system as if it is beyond repair. One is accountability, the other starts to look like deep frustration, and over time voters can sense that difference even when it is not openly stated.
A country that started out bad and will always be bad, founded on an unrelenting history of sucking and unable to change. But we have changed a lot. Democrat Cori Bush tweeted, "This land is stolen land and black people still aren't free." And this was on the 4th of July. Really? Not that I give a shit about the 4th of July. I've never been a rah-rah guy. But I am a perspective guy. And that's what too much of the left has lost, perspective.
Bill Maher's broader point, as he frames it, is something you can't really unsee once it clicks. There's a growing tendency on parts of the left to describe America as if it's a collapsing dystopia rather than a messy but still functioning country. In that framing, even routine political criticism can start to feel like total system rejection. He points to examples like controversial social media claims about black Americans not being free in the United States as an illustration of how rhetoric can escalate beyond grounded critique. The argument isn't that inequality or injustice doesn't exist or shouldn't be debated, but that statements which ignore obvious social and political progress risk turning serious discussion into a simplified, almost cartoon version of reality. And this is the pattern he keeps returning to. When every issue is treated as existential collapse and every flaw as proof the system is fundamentally rotten, the message stops sounding like reform and starts sounding like total disillusionment. At that point, he argues, it shifts from policy disagreement into something closer to a brand built on constant institutional contempt.
72% of black people under 30 are optimistic about their future in America. Way more than white people the same age. And as far as the land goes, yes, I guess we could change the name of Captain America to Captain Stolen Land. But honestly, to all the people who start every public event now with one of those land acknowledgments where they say, "I'm standing on land that was stolen from the proud indigenous people of the Chumash tribe," I say either give it back or shut the fuck up.
Bill Maher takes another swing here aimed at what he sees as political theater, arguing that a lot of modern progressive politics has become highly staged messaging driven by emotion and symbolism, but lacking real-world impact. He points to land acknowledgments as an example, saying that while they publicly recognize indigenous history and past injustices, nothing meaningful usually follows after the statement, no policy change, no restitution, and no structural shift, just the ritual and then back to normal life. For him, the concern is not whether the history is valid, it is, but whether the performance is replacing action, and when harm is acknowledged publicly but nothing concrete is done to address it, the gesture starts to look more like branding than reform, and that is his core frustration, a political culture drifting into optics-first storytelling where looking aware matters more than actually fixing what is broken.
Ask any of them why they came here, and they will tell you the same thing. Ron DeSantis put me on a plane. But they will also tell you that America, for all that's so shitty about it right now, is still the last best hope. And those people asking for our votes to take it over should remember that.
Here's the blunt version Bill Maher would probably agree with. The idea that America hates women as a blanket explanation for elections like 2016 and 2024 is a stretch that doesn't hold up under real pressure. Most voters aren't sitting there doing identity calculations in the voting booth. They're focused on practical concerns like prices, jobs, borders, and stability. Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris didn't lose simply because they were women, but because a sufficient number of voters, fairly or unfairly, didn't trust them with leadership at that time. That's the uncomfortable but normal reality of elections. Winners and losers shift based on perception, not just identity. Reducing those outcomes to misogyny flattens a much more complex picture into a single storyline and skips over the actual political and strategic reasons behind voter decisions. And this is where Maher's broader point comes in. When every defeat is reframed as oppression, it stops being analysis and starts becoming avoidance, and once that happens, there's nothing useful left to learn or fix.
If she had some deprogramming, she could be such a fantastic candidate.
What do you mean deprogramming?
Well, she just doesn't. She's never going to resonate with people outside of the bubble that she lives in the very, very far left.
Here's the thing that stands out in Bill Maher's critique. The tone of political commentary often shifts too neatly depending on who holds power. Under Biden, many of the same voices now describing America as oppressive or collapsing tended to frame the country in a more functional and cautiously optimistic way, acknowledging flaws but still talking about stability, recovery, and progress. Then leadership changes and the language flips quickly, with the same institutions and everyday realities suddenly described in much darker terms as broken, hostile, or in crisis. Maher's point isn't that criticism is invalid, but that the intensity of the narrative seems to track political convenience more than consistent principle, and when that swing happens so fast it naturally raises questions about how grounded the framing really is.